I've been wanting to do a zodiac series of paintings for years now, but I've never quite nailed down the concept until this year. I knew I wanted to start with Pisces because I'm a Pisces sun and I'm tired of Pisces always being the last sign in the zodiac, so I'm putting her first this time. Fight me. I also knew I wanted to incorporate mermaids somehow, and then a few weeks ago, I had an idea to do a mermaid and a reverse mermaid, which admittedly is slightly cursed, but I like that about it. And I realized that could be the theme for my zodiac series, slightly cursed interpretations of the signs. So the first thing I did was create the sketch digitally, print it out, and now I'm doing a charcoal transfer onto my watercolor block. As you just saw, I coated the back of the drawing with charcoal pencil, then taped it to my watercolor block, and now I'm tracing over my drawing in ballpoint pen. The pen specifically is kind of unnecessary, but it helps me keep track of which lines I've traced over and which ones I haven't yet. Since doing this, I realized I could also use graphite instead of charcoal, and it might smudge less, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time, and luckily I was able to get most of the smudges out with my kneaded eraser. Then I taped off the edges with washi tape, and because I wanted this to have rounded inward corners, I added masking fluid to, mask off the corners. Unfortunately, and this is mild spoilers for the end, this washi tape didn't like sticking to my paper, so the edges aren't quite as crisp as I would have liked. But I came up with a solution that I think worked out really well. You'll have to watch more to see what I did though. A little bit about the painting process. I originally wanted to do this piece in watercolors, so I laid down some very, very light washes of color as a base, and then I realized I was not enjoying the process at all. I was really hesitant to make any marks in any darker colors because I was worried about messing it up and not being able to fix it because watercolor is a bit less forgiving of a medium since it's transparent. I might have been able to stick with watercolors if I had done a bit more planning, but I went into this with a sketch and a mood board full of references, and that's it. Soon enough, I decided to switch to gouache, and I started having a much better time. If I were to do it again, I would go back and do some color comps in watercolor first so that I would have a bit more of a plan to work off of, and then I would stick with watercolor for the whole piece. But it is what it is, and I think it did turn out really well. So a reverse mermaid, if you weren't previously aware, is a fish with human legs instead of a tail. You know, the reverse of a mermaid. Pretty self-explanatory. I have been pretty enamored with the concept of reverse mermaids ever since I first learned about them many, many years ago. I just think they're funny and weird and cool, and I've been trying to more publicly embrace the weird things that I like. It's hard because I do care a lot about what other people think of me, and I worry about judgment, but on the other hand, I'm never going to find people who share my weird little interests if I keep them to myself. So here's a step towards that. Like I was saying before, I didn't really have a clear plan for the colors of this piece, but a few of my inspiration/reference photos were in the pastel-y pink iridescent zone with blue-green to contrast, so that's what I ended up going for. Not to mention, I do love the way that pastels show up in gouache, so I've been wanting to incorporate those types of color schemes into my work lately. I even cleaned out my gouache palette for this to make sure I could get those nice clean pastels. I almost wish I had taken a before picture of my palette, actually, because it was a mess. If you can't already tell from the lovely flowing fins that I've given these girls, I've based these mermaids off of betta fish. I suppose technically male betta fish are the ones with the prettier flowy fins, but in my mind these two are girls. Maybe they're trans. Who knows? These mermaids say trans rights. I actually had a betta fish when I was a freshman in college because those were the only pets that we were allowed in the dorms. Fish in general, not just betta fish, but we happened to have betta fish, and mine was very pink and very pretty, but her fins were definitely not as pretty as my roommate's male betta fish. Their names were Pippi and Petey, by the way. It was around this point in the painting process when I realized my initial background washes were way too light. When I started darkening the background, I was kicking myself for not doing the background wash over before I rendered the mermaids, but that's what I get for going in without a plan. I carefully went around the mermaids, and I actually managed to successfully avoid reactivating any of the paint. I did have to go back over and clean up some of the edges, but overall it wasn't so bad. The stars are an element that I think I want to incorporate in every piece in the series, both as a way to add detail and as a nod to the constellations that zodiac signs are based on. There's not any specific reason for the number of stars. I just did what I thought looked visually appealing. And the reason I have them hanging on strings is also just because I like the look of it. There was an artist I used to follow when I was in late middle school, early high school, and they would put little details on strings near the top of their art, and I always wanted to incorporate that sort of thing into my own art. So here we are. Really, this whole piece is sort of a self-indulgent cotton candy fever dream, honestly. I think that's why I like it so much, because I just try to incorporate as many things that I liked as possible into it. I added plants at the bottom to fill in the space a little more and to cover up the ground line that I made. I think initially I was going to paint the ground a different color than the rest of the background, but that didn't end up happening, so I just had this dark charcoal line that needed camouflaging. Luckily, the plants did the trick and it looks a lot better. Although, looking at the finished piece now, I do wish I had pushed the colors a little bit to match the vibe of the rest of the painting, maybe kept them a little lighter on the more pastel side, and possibly added in some pinks for a slightly iridescent look. I might alter the colors a little bit for the print version, we'll see. I have to say, the true hero of this painting was the teeny tiny detail brush that I've been using for all the fine details. I got it for Christmas, thanks Mom and Dad, and this was the first time I really had a chance to use it in a full painting, and boy did I use the heck out of it. I always love working really small, so it's nice to have brushes that can hold up to that. All my other small brushes are kind of cheap and lose their points easily, so I was really happy I had this one, especially for the lettering. Of course, even the best brushes can't always hold up to user error, and I did flub that last S pretty badly. That's really the only part of this painting that I don't like, and the only part that I don't think I could fix on the original. But every mistake is a chance to improve, so I'm sure I'll do better with the lettering on the next piece. And this is the part where I think I'm done. So I take off the washi tape that's been threatening to fall off this entire time anyway, and you can see the edge is super wobbly and not at all crisp like I wanted. But it's okay. I decided to line the edges with my gold Posca marker, and honestly, I think that turned out way better than if I had just had the clean, unlined edges. I think it adds some nice framing, and it's sort of an anchor for the stars to hang from, which I totally forgot to line the strings hanging from the stars. But don't worry, I will fix that right about now. And then I figured, since we're lining things, let's add some more detail. At this point, there were still some visible charcoal lines around the outside of some of the edges, so I wanted to mask those a little better and add a few more little details. It's really hard to tell sometimes when a piece is finished, but I felt like we weren't quite there yet. Even now, actually, I'm thinking I could have added a few more details, maybe some sparkles in a few key places, but I still think this piece turned out great as it is now. I'm especially happy with the iridescent look that I was able to pull off with both of the mermaid scales. I feel like they should have names. Comment down below what you think these mermaids should be named. And the final step is cutting the paper off of the block. I inserted the palette knife into the little gap this block provided and just ran it around the edges. And she's free. Here is the finished piece. I do have prints available in my Redbubble shop. I'll have that linked down below. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. Be sure to like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see the rest of the slightly cursed zodiac. I'll have that throughout the year. And leave a comment letting me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Bye!